In this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about dividing perennials. First question to ask is, why are you dividing them? Some people feel that you have to dig up a perennial every couple years and divide it, and that's simply not true. I have perennials in the garden that have been here for 12 years. I've never divided them. I just leave them alone. There are three good reasons to divide a perennial. Number one is that the plant gets too big. Most perennials get a little bigger every year, a little wider. And if you pick the right perennials, that won't happen too quickly. But at some point, they're just too big for the space you want to give them. And it's time to divide them. The second reason is that the perennial will tell you when it's time to divide. If you see that the flower rate is going down, you're getting less flowers, maybe the flowers aren't quite as large, it's time to divide it. The plant is too crowded, and it's responding to that by not flowering as well. The third reason for dividing is that the plant starts looking a bit ugly. And some perennials, what they'll do is they'll get a hollow center. So you get the plants growing around the outside, but the ones in the middle have died off, and you get this hollow crown. The plant doesn't really need to be divided because it grows naturally like that. But for aesthetic reasons, that's a good time to divide. So when is the best time to divide perennials? I like to do it in the spring. I'm in zone 5. As soon as the ground is dry enough to work, that's when I divide my perennials. And I have a general rule of thumb, and that is that I want everything moved and in place before June 1st. June just gets too warm, and the middle of summer is just too hot to divide perennials. Now, the other good time to do it is in the fall. Roots on plants grow best when the soil is cool. So September, October, and even up to November is a good time to move and divide perennials. In this video, I'm going to show you two different ways to divide perennials. Now, the tools I use for that are like this, a spade, but the tool I use most is a shovel. And I have this nice sturdy iron shovel, and that's what I use to get the plants out of the ground. And then I'll use the spade to split them up. Now let me show you how that's done. Here's an old clump of daylilies. It's in my way here because I'm moving the pathway, but I'm going to show you how I would divide this. The first way I'm going to show you is to dig up the whole clump, get it out of the ground, and then divide it. And that's what I do with most plants. I take my shovel and I go around the edge pretty close to the new growth, and I push in as deep as the shovel will go, and I pry back a little bit, not too much, just a little bit. Then I move over and do it again. I go all around the outside. And you can feel as it's getting looser, but don't try to take the whole clump out at once. As it gets good and loose, get the shovel a little more underneath and pry up. And one more should do it. So the clump is now loose, and you can see that does a fair amount of damage to the plant, but there's lots of good roots left here. Now there's a couple of things you can do. If you want some small pieces of this plant, I find the easiest way is to just pull it off from the edge, and now you can pot that up or give it to a friend or move it somewhere else in the garden. But I like to keep these clumps a little bigger. If I plant this in the garden, it's going to take 3-4 years to turn into a nice clump and give me a good flowering session. So these are a little too small for me. To get a bigger piece, I like to use my spade. I usually start by cutting it in half. Now I've got two clumps. You can see we've cut a lot of roots and stems and so on. Terrible damage to the plant, but it will recover. Now that's a good sized clump to go into the garden, but if I wanted more of these, then I just cut it again. And out of this clump I can easily get 4 really good sized plants here to put somewhere else. Now as soon as you do this, you do want to put them in the ground right away. Don't let them sit around like this. That's hard on the plants. So here I have a clump of iris. They're Siberian iris, and the center's gotten pretty hollow here, so that indicates to me that it's time to divide this plant. I'm also moving the pathway here, so this edge is kind of in my way. I showed you how to divide a whole perennial by digging it up, but sometimes you have a perennial that you're not quite sure how well it will divide, and you don't really want to disturb it too much. I said I'm going to take some of this front edge off, but I want to leave the back alone. I don't want to disturb any of these roots over here. I want to do as little damage to this plant as I can. I just want to get rid of the front part here. So I do that a little differently. I'll take my shovel and just cut along the plant. And now I dig up this side of it. On the edging. So now I've taken out a piece, I can move it to the other part of the garden, and I just leave this piece alone and I don't damage it. So this will recover much quicker. And this is actually the way I prefer to do it for most of my plants. I hope you enjoyed this video about dividing perennials. If you have some questions, please leave them in the comments and I will personally answer them for you. I have a number of other videos about perennials and I'll put a link in the top right hand corner. Happy gardening!